Hey everybody, Diesel here from Imagine Your Goddess, and I decided to do a short video today talking to you about the recent change to the Cardfight Vanguard scene, which is of course the upgrade from 8 to 16 G units in the Stride deck. Now, let's talk a little bit about what this is for. Originally, you could only have 8 cards in a Stride deck. Exactly, or no more than 8. So your choices had evolved around what deck you were playing and how you go about getting the best bang for what you are playing. So, for instance, if you were playing Link Joker, specifically Messiah, you would have to run Messiah Strides, probably one Judgment Messiah for tech, and you might run upwards of 4 Big Crunch Dragon, because Big Crunch Dragon is a big stride for Link Joker. Now, really, stride decks don't look very different from one another from deck to deck. There are occasions where there's a specialty card like Messiah, but in general, stride decks usually have 4 copies of a powerhouse, and then a few cards otherwise that fit the theme of the deck. Sorry about that. The Stride deck, however, has expanded now to make it so that you not only have Strides, but G Guardians. Now, G Guardians, as you guys might know, are cards that you can call to the guard circle by ditching a heal trigger from your hand when both you and your opponent are at 3. They generally have 1500 or 15,000 shield and an effect that not only pushes up their shield but usually does something. These came out in Fighter Collection, and with that they wanted to create a rule that would make you use them. So they expanded the G deck to 16 cards. That way, you could run some variations of G units that are Stride and G units that are Guardians. Now, the way the Stride deck is built originally does not leave a lot of room for what we call choice. If you've paid attention to my videos in the past, you might have heard me talk once or twice about the illusion of choice. And I'm going to say now that we have 16 cards, that the 8-card Stride deck was an illusion of choice. This is what it means to be illusion. The Stride deck started making people think that they could really play anything. Like, they'd have the ability to play any deck they wanted, because if the deck was no good, then they could just add good Strides, and if all else failed, they could just rely on their Strides to get them through a game, and it would give them a chance to do stuff. And for a little while, people actually tried that. But what they found out was that your core deck still had to be pretty good in order to win games, whether or not your Stride deck was there. And they also realized that the decks started morphing to accommodate the Strides as opposed to the Strides accommodating the deck. And you'll notice that a lot when we talk about Chronojet, or if we talk about Messiah. Messiah is not really about Ego Messiah and getting off Alter Ego's ability. It's about Amnesty and its variant form to try to lock a bunch of stuff and then unlock and gain massive power on the Stride turn. Okay? So, with an 8 G-Guard zone, and Strides only being the only thing within a G deck, we got this slight illusion of choice that we would be able to do other things. But in reality, what we did was limit our choices, because you almost always had to Stride when you could Stride, because the benefit to striding was so much bigger than the loss. The gains that you got were insane, so you had to Stride if you could Stride. which created the stay at level 2 decks, which I was never really a big fan of, which I'll talk about in another video. But your choices tended to be go into stride or stay at 2. Going up to 3 and not striding was mostly a hindrance. And I know that people will go out there and say, well, what about the duo deck? Yes, of course there are exceptions, but in general, you always wanted to stride when you could stride. Okay? Now we have the new G units, and we have Sabreeze. And with the expansion from 8 to 16, this allows us an actual choice, and that is the construction of your G deck. How many G Guardians do you run? How many strides? Do you run Sabreeze? Does Sabreeze help you in any capacity other than just being there? These questions are all things that will shape the way the game is played in the future. Some people would say that you only run 4 G Guardians because you can only really use 4 G Guardians at most. I think that is untrue, because while you might run 4 G Guardians, for sure, there's no rule that says that you can't run more, and the notion behind it is that you want choice of what you guard with. Almost every G deck right now wants to run at least 1 Screw. Almost every G deck right now wants to run at least 1 Dismal, because the options that it gives you against certain decks is important. So then some people might run 2 or 3 of their clan-specific G Guardian. This is before set 7, where we see that there's going to be even more G Guardians, and some G Guardians are going to have outrageous effects. So we now have a choice in the things that we're running. And with that choice comes responsibility to seek through our decks and see what works. So this is a complete G deck, and in some cases it fulfills the things that a lot of people like. Get more copies of the consistent strides in. Experiment with a few more different type strides. Make sure that you have G Guardians. And it adds Sabreeze. Sabreeze, in my personal opinion, is in a G deck so that your opponent doesn't stay at 2. Or rather, they punish themselves by trying to constantly ride to 2. Now, do you need to run Sabreeze in every deck? Absolutely not. And some people might argue with me on that. But just the fact that Sabreeze exists now will cause a shift in the meta that will get people away from trying to stay at 2. Or if they do stay at 2, they're going to try to stay at 2 by riding constantly into 2. Riding into 2 gives you a net gain of 0. Because you ride into a grade that does not give you a 1 when an extra plus drive when you drive. So riding back into 2 is essentially stifling yourself, making you lose one of your card advantage draws per turn. But people will do it because they don't want to get Sabreezed, and that's understandable. This is going to change the format in a lot of ways. I think that the correct number of G Guardians to run in a stride deck right now is 5. I would say you run 1 Dismal, you run one Screw, maybe 2 Screw, and you figure out whether or not your current clan G Guardian is for you. I think that numbers will tweak. Maybe you will run 3 Amnesty, but maybe you'll find that running 4 Amnesty, taking Big Crunch down to 2, and pushing up Excelixes so that you can benefit the most from all the Amnesties that you run will be a better choice. Things will move around and shift based on the player's ability to adapt to the new stride situation. Also, with a 16G unit deck, you obviously can run more strides. And some people I've seen have been trying to run 16 strides. One of the benefits of this is it actually gives you choice versus other types of decks. So your opponent running Dimension Police won't automatically be a hindrance to you because you can run a stride that helps you against that particular deck. In essence, you're basically making a stride deck that gives you the ability to counter decks that before you might not have been able to counter. These choices expand our game and the way that we think a lot. And in the upcoming months, when we start getting in G-Guardians that have effects, in 7 they've already leaked a Kagero unit that when it guards, it blows up the attacker. This is creating interaction on your player's turn, which up until now, Vanguard has very little interaction on players between turns. So, it will augment the flow of our game. And it will make it so that we have to become more conscious of what our players are playing. We have to be more self-aware of what we're doing. And we have to test our decks thoroughly. I think that we are about to enter an age of Vanguard that requires the most out of us. The most thought that we've ever put into things. The most dedication to making sure that rules and effects work out the way they're supposed to. And I think that it will be a lot of fun. But you have to remember that you are no longer tied to the rules that an 8G deck made you tied to. So, use your freedom of choice and figure out the best way to utilize our new stride deck. This is Diesel from Imagine Your Goddess, signing out.